What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We have a fantastic episode lined up for you today because we're bringing in our good friend, Mike Renner of CBS, covers all things NFL and the NFL draft for the folks at CBS. And we're talking specifically draft here today on Next Pats because I know that's where a lot of you are directing your focus at this very moment. And so what does Mike think the Patriots should do if they have a top 5 pick? It's looking like they're having a top 5 pick. What if they have the number 1 overall pick? Do they go with the shiny toy? Do they go with the receiver, Travis Hunter? Or do they try to trade down, maybe get the left tackle, Will Campbell? And is Will Campbell even a left tackle? Is Travis Hunter even a receiver? We're taking a big picture, 5,000-foot view of the NFL draft and the talent really strewn throughout the draft. You're going to be surprised to hear, and maybe not in a good way, how Mike feels about the draft overall. It's not great, people. But that's where you make your money if you're a scout. And that's what puts the pressure on guys like Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh to make the most of these high-end picks that they're about to have. Top of the first round, top of the second round, top of the third round. You've got to find players. And in a draft that doesn't look like it's the deepest, that might be tough. That's why you make the big bucks. That's why you're in the positions you're in. It's why Robert Kraft hired you. Is he having any second guesses about those things as he sits here in December and maybe even he is getting reports on the draft and how likely it is that his team is able to find legit pieces who can fill immediate needs immediately? And is he feeling great about their chances of doing that after seeing last year's draft where, yes, they hit the quarterback? And they made a great call by not trading down. Our guy Tom Curran sitting next to me day after day after day in the spring talking about how the Patriots need to trade down, how it would be silly for them not to trade down because the team's just not ready to support a good quarterback. Well, they got that one right. Elliott Wolf did. Matt Groh did. The entire front office. They got that one right. And good for them. It's a franchise-altering kind of decision. How about the rest of that draft? We'll see. You don't want to call it a day on any of these guys yet after less than one season into their pro careers, but it's not looking great. I think that's fair to say, especially as we've been tracking it here on this podcast. Haven't been a whole lot of positive things to say about guys like Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. We focused a whole episode on Layden Robinson earlier in the season, but the opportunities to do that since then have been few and far between. We haven't seen Caden Wallace, and when we did in the summertime, it didn't look great. So how can the Patriots make the most of these picks? Mike Renner has some great ideas for us. It's a fantastic conversation. He has takes on Travis Hunter, on Will Campbell. He's even got some extra, some bonus, some spicy draft takes for us about 5 months ahead of the draft. So let's get right to the conversation. Without further ado, here's Mike. There he is. CBS's own Mike Renner, host of Pushing the Pile podcast, NFL draft, all things football. He's the best. He's here with us multiple times a year, really. We really don't usually get into the draft until the combine, but because the Patriots season, Mike, is pretty much over already, we figured we'd have you on during the bye week. Thanks so much for being with us, bud.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's the earliest you've gotten my draft takes, unfortunately, and not in a good way, right?
Yeah, it's sort of a sad thing for Patriots fans that we are where we are. But when it comes to the draft, it feels, Patriots fans are willing and ready to accept any and all draft intel that comes their way because it's sort of the one thing they have to look forward to. Everybody's loving watching Drake May, by the way, and I'll give you credit as I think the first person, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you have him second behind Caleb Williams? Yep. Did you even have him first or second?
I did.
Okay.
I think I came on here last year. I think it was with you, the combine maybe, and I was saying trade down unless you can get Drake May. And I was like, unless Drake May's there, if Drake May's there, home run, slam dunk, you make that pick. And he was there. They made that pick, and well, dude looks the part, man. He's been awesome.
I mean, he has been really even better than I thought he would be. And after listening to you and others and sort of going back and watching a lot, I'm sitting there sort of scratching my head saying, why would they ever trade down if they have the opportunity to draft this guy. But he's been even better than I thought he would be, Mike. I mean, it's some of the stuff that I feel like cropped up for him in college, just some of the inconsistency in terms of the accuracy and sort of the head-scratching misses. He's been one of the most accurate quarterbacks in football, according to some metrics. Has he surprised even you?
Yeah, I think I've seen improvement in a number of areas and a readiness to him that even I didn't quite give him credit for. And now I was super high on him. I was saying that any other year, I would have thought about him as like a slam dunk number one overall. Don't even think about it. You take him there. He's that talented. But yeah, it just hasn't. The misses that were on tape that I guess his junior year at North Carolina, nowhere near as many just wide open misses that we saw that season. He looks much more like the guy we saw as a sophomore. And that's why, like, you kind of bet on the guy who showed it early, right? He was so good that 1 year prior to his junior year that you just knew he could recapture that. And he's done that and man, exceeded even my lofty expectations.
So now we're thinking about how can the Patriots surround this guy with more talent, because you could make the argument that he's working in the least talented offensive huddle in the entire NFL. And so we are looking ahead toward the draft. And I want to put it to you, very basic stuff, sort of 5,000-foot view stuff when it comes to the draft, because we're 5 months out. Mike, how bad is this draft really? Because it feels like everything I have read and heard about the 2025 draft class is that, you're not going to be all that impressed by the time April rolls around. But how do you feel about it? Again, it's early, but is this a bad draft class?
It's really bad, yeah. And unfortunately, it's because of the premier positions that you would ideally want to take at the top of the draft: offensive tackle, wide receiver, and I would say defensive end to a degree. I think this defensive end class is insanely deep, but I don't think there's a single guy I'm going to have like a top 5 grade on. There's no Will Anderson waiting for you, who you know for sure when you draft him, you got yourself a good one. So it's a unique class. It's a class where I say when it's like this, that's when scouts have to make their money, right? If you had a top 10 pick last year, you didn't have to be a good scout. You could have thrown a dart and hit a guy who's a all pro caliber player, right? It was just such a good draft. This year, I don't think that's going to be the case. So there are positions where it's strong, but they are not your traditional positions that you necessarily draft highly. I think running back's one of them. I think off-ball linebacker is one of them in this year's class, but it's like those guys don't go first round. So, and I think maybe safety, it's a fairly good class for safeties as well. But again, not the positions you usually want to be taking in the top 5 to 10 of the draft. So it's very reminiscent of, I guess, was that 2022? I'm so bad with draft years, but whatever year Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson went 1 and 2.
I think you're right.
I think it's a little bit better than that year's class. And there's a couple quarterbacks that'll actually make it interesting at the top, where that year didn't have the QBs. But it's much closer to that level of talent than we've seen the 2 years since then.
Okay, so that's a horrible thing to hear if you're a Patriots fan, because you're going to have another top 5 pick. You might even, according to some places, Mike, they are the most likely team to land the number 1 overall pick. And so maybe they can sort of escape some of this draft class's deficiencies, if we want to put it that way, if they have that number 1 overall pick, because it does sound like there is one player at least who everybody is going to consider a blue chip guy. But especially for a scouting staff that after the Drake May pick, and I give him credit for picking May and not trading down, after that pick in the first round last year, the rest of that draft class is looking pretty rough right now in 2024, less than a year later. I do want to ask you about that guy that I think everybody has sort of at the top of the board, and it's Travis Hunter. Do you have him at the top of the board? Do you think he's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft? And where are you playing him, Mike? Because as much as the Patriots could use another corner, what they really could use is a wide receiver. And yet I feel like people are leaning more towards playing him defensively as opposed to offensively. Where do you think he ends up playing as a pro?
I do have him number 1 overall in terms of just like, regardless of position, he's the best player in this class. Now, does he go number 1? I still think the quarterbacks do. I think if you end up with number 1, you're the Patriots, you can trade and get maybe not the biggest haul, maybe not like the Trey Lance haul that they ended up getting that year, but you can get a pretty big haul in return that to me is well worth passing on maybe a Travis Hunter and going somewhere else in this class, especially since I think a lot of the allure of Travis Hunter, and don't get me wrong, I think he's an insanely good prospect, is that he might be playing both ways in the NFL. How sustainable that is over a 17-game season, I don't know. And I do think there's a world where he comes in and moonlights on one side of the ball or the other. But again, it's like that's almost creating more problems for you as an offensive defensive coordinator, that just like, if you got a guy who's elite at one position, you're happy as heck with that. You don't need to change the positions. Now, which position is it for Travis Hunter? Truthfully, it's both. And I think that is also the interesting part is wide receivers make a lot more money than cornerbacks. He may be better in terms of corners versus corners, but he's also a guy who I project as a number one wide receiver that could and should, if things go and if he focuses on, just one position, should be like a $30+ million wide receiver on a second contract. Whereas he'd be, top cornerback contracts or something like $24 million, $25 million. So you're costing yourself money if you are playing the defensive side of the football, even if you are theoretically better there in the NFL. But I think he's awesome. I think truly he is a wide receiver one, probably the best wide receiver prospect in this draft class, probably the best cornerback prospect in this draft class if you just focused on one side of the ball or the other. And so from that perspective, you're the Patriots. I think you draft him to play wide receiver. And if you can get him to play like on the slot on third downs, you're happy as heck with that.
Are you worried at all about his size as, even if he does have the skill set to be a number one overall receiver? I think last I saw he was about 6 feet. And he's going to be under 200 pounds, it looks like. I think I saw 185.
Yeah, he's skinny.
Yeah. Is that an issue for you? Or is Devontae Smith sort of erased that for everybody because he's come in and been such a good pro?
Yeah, I mean, Devontae Smith, Garrett Wilson, there are guys doing it with slim frames, probably slimmer even than Travis Hunter. But I also think once he doesn't have to be in the kind of conditioning he is to play wide receiver and corner, right? It's like a distance runner versus a sprinter. The distance runners, you go watch the Olympics, those guys are skin and bones. Sprinters have a little more meat on them. If you want to just train him like a sprinter, I think he's going to gain a little more mass. I think he's going to get a little stronger once he gets to the NFL when he doesn't have to be as purely a VO2 max sort of guy where he just has to play all day long. So yeah, it's a little concerning, but watch the tape and I'm just like, there's unique ability here that could and should get even better in the NFL when he just can focus on one side of the football.
What kind of receiver would he be? I mean, you mentioned Garrett Wilson. I'm just pulling up his numbers from the combine a few years ago, and it does look like a really good comp. I mean, he was just a shade, like a quarter of an inch under 6 feet. 183 is how he measured in Indy, and obviously that guy's a stud. So is that the kind of player you're thinking of? Is he more of a slot guy? Like, what is it that makes him? Yes. For people here in New England, Mike, that aren't watching a lot of college football, what might make him a great receiver in this league?
I think he's that mold of receivers. I mean, like Garrett Wilson, where he's not purely an outside guy, but if you want to put him on the outside, he can win vertically. He's not purely a slot guy, but if you want to throw him some schemed up touches and some screens, he's going to break a ton of tackles and make some plays after the catch. And he's got long arms, great frame for, you like these wide receivers, kind of like Brandon Ayuk, where they're maybe not the tallest, because once you start getting a little too tall, 6'2", 6'3", you lose some mobility aspects. Like those guys, it's tougher for them to separate, bigger strike zone for people to hit. But then when you have really long arms and broad shoulders, the way Travis Hunter does, well, you still have this big catch radius where you can pluck balls outside your frame, even if it doesn't come with the added height that isn't necessarily what matters at the receiver position. So he's got that ideal frame to really move up and down the line of scrimmage, be a guy that runs any route you want him to from any alignment, and a true number one in terms of how you could feature him in that offense.
All right, let's move to a different position now, because this is a spot that I know a lot of Patriots fans are concerned about moving forward for the Patriots. I think there might be some out there who say, they like the receiver, they like the shiny object, but they really feel like you have to just protect Drake May. He's taken his fair share of hits. He's done a pretty good job of avoiding them, too, and he's done a great job as a runner. But, boy, what they have on the offensive line, as bad as the receiver position is, the line might be worse. What does the tackle position look like this year, Mike? And Will Campbell, that's the name that's already generating buzz here in the Boston area. Again, simple questions this week, 5 months from the draft. What position is this guy going to play in the league, Mike? Because there seems to be some question there.
Yeah, I think I'd start him at tackle. Will Campbell, the LSU offensive tackle. Shorter arms, but not so short that there are guys I think with shorter arms around the NFL getting it done at a high level. Braden Smith, Bernard Raymond, the two tackles for the Colts who have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, both under 33-inch arms. It's not the death knell it once was. To play tackle, especially in today's NFL, you just have to be able to move, right? The stunts you see, the slants you see, the blitzes you see, it's like, can you pick up a guy who's 240 pounds that runs a 4.5? You'll see way more of those guys in the NFL nowadays than guys who are 6'5", 285 with 35-inch arms that give you the worry about playing tackle in the NFL, or that used to give you the worry about those short arm guys playing tackle in the NFL. So I think he's worth, a top 5 pick just because I think he's that good and will be good in the NFL. Now, I don't think he's, let's say, Penei Sewell levels of prospect, Tristan Wirfs, Andrew Thomas levels of prospect. Like, I think he's a very good tackle prospect. I don't think he's an elite tackle prospect where you draft him, you plug him, and then he's a Pro Bowler for the rest of his career. I don't see quite that. But there's only 2 guys in this tackle class that I even see as plug and play starters, like even close to that mold of you draft them, you don't have to worry about them, they're that good. Him and Kelvin Banks, the Texas tackle, are the only 2. So they won't last long. When that's the case, the Patriots aren't the only one who need tackle. It won't last long. You won't be able to wait till the second round to get one, or the third round like they tried last year to get one. And obviously we've seen how that worked out. But I do think that, if you're drafting in the top 5, maybe it's not the best value. Maybe there might be better players at their respective positions elsewhere in this draft. But the need is so much. And I look at this Patriots roster, and I think I look at it like this. We could win an AFC East title with this receiving core. You can't win an AFC East title with this offensive line. You're never going to. I don't care how good the rest of the roster is. You can't do it behind that O-line. So that's what has to improve first. Ideally, you're going to do it through free agency as well. But I think in the draft, getting him a franchise left tackle to protect him for, foreseeably the rest of his career is something I'd be very interested in if I'm the Patriots.
So let me give you this hypothetical. Say the Patriots aren't picking 1 overall. Say they're picking 3. But as you mentioned, the quarterback value is such that the teams picking 1 and 2 go Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, whichever order. And the Patriots are sitting there at 3, and they have the opportunity to draft either Travis Hunter or Will Campbell. Where are you going in that scenario?
I'm going Travis Hunter just because I think he's that much better at his position. And again, I think you win in the draft by just getting the best players. Right? At the end of the day, you can, if you play your roster every single year and say, what do I need for this roster? You'll just end up missing out on talented players. If you're drafting not the most talented player year in and year out, that'll catch up to you relative to the rest of the NFL. And especially when it's like a top of the draft thing. That's especially where you don't want to be trying to force a need into a position. So I see Hunter as considerably better at whether it's wide receiver or corner than Campbell is as a tackle prospect. So I go that route. Now I'm hoping that you can then backfill via free agency or trade or whatever it is, because I don't think you're going to find a starting tackle in the second round. But that's just, in my opinion, how I would go about trying to build a team. I just don't want to shoehorn in a guy that has to fit there, even if I think Will Campbell's a darn good prospect still. Yeah,
it's such an interesting conversation, and we're going to be having it for months here in Boston. But, do you go the Lions route and build up that line? And, it was the Bengals who really had the opportunity to make this choice between receiver and Penei Sewell, who you just mentioned earlier, but they take Jamar Chase and they go to a Super Bowl. So, it worked out going the other way, too, even though the Lions are the sexy team right now to look at and say, hey, look how they built. Look how sound the logic is. Look where it has them, positioned not only now but moving forward. But sometimes just taking the best player, especially at a position like receiver, where that guy can make such an impact on the entire offense, just in terms of changing the geometry of the defense, I feel like sometimes it is warranted to go with the shiny object, even though it feels like the sexy. Sometimes the sexy thing, I guess what I'm saying, Mike, is sometimes the sexy thing is the right thing to do, and that's okay.
Yes. No, and I go to, let's see, the 2022 draft, the one we were just talking about, a lot of people drafted tackles in that top 10, right? You had Ike Ekwonu, you had Evan Neal, and you had Charles Cross. All 3 of them all passed on Garrett Wilson. I think all 3 of those teams would want Garrett Wilson in a redraft if they could. And also, like offensive tackle translating the NFL, a lot of times, the rookie year, I don't care how good of a prospect you are, you might not be good as a rookie. Like, it may not be that quick fix. So as much as you want this tackle to protect this theoretical left tackle of the future, protect him, sometimes it takes like 3 years for those guys to really get in there. And you look at that tackle draft that I just said, Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, through 2 years, were not great tackles, so a lot of times it's easier said than done at the tackle position. Not all top tackle prospects are created equally. So Yeah, I'm going to go Travis Hunter in that situation. You just have to play it year by year and player by player.
Mike, before we let you go, do you have any spicy draft takes you can give us 5 months before the draft even happens?
I will say, I think there's one more franchise quarterback. Everyone's talking about Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, rightfully so. I think they're great. I see one more franchise quarterback that could declare. Now, will he declare? I don't know, but I am willing to go to bat for Drew Aller being a franchise quarterback at the NFL level. Now, I think in his best interest, I'd have him come back to Penn State for one more season. But I see a guy with the mobility in the pocket to avoid pressure, doesn't take sacks, cannon of an arm, and the strides I saw from last year, this year. It's like, seems like only a matter of time before he makes it. So not getting a lot of hype, but I'm willing to go out on a limb and say I would take him very highly when he ultimately does declare.
Does Drake May and his success, they might be very different players, but does that lead you to this spicy take, Mike? Because I'm just looking at some of Drew Aller's numbers right now. He looks like a big boy, 6'5", 238. And so he's even bigger than Drake May. But the frame and the arm strength and that presence in the pocket, do you put more weight into that? And does Drake May's development, early development, the track that he's on, does that help you come to that conclusion?
Well, I kind of have a take, and this might be just dead wrong, but I think height at quarterback nowadays is more important than ever. And you watch just Caleb Williams, who was 6'1", right, versus Drake May, Jaden Daniels, 6'4" quarterbacks, and how they're able to read quickly pressures, especially, and I say today because the way defensive coordinators are post-snap adjusting more so than ever, especially around the line of scrimmage with blitzes and whatnot. Those guys that can see over their O-lines immediately and diagnose that stuff and don't have any vision concerns. I think it's a big help for them to read this post-snap stuff, especially in the front seven that teams are doing with the rotations in that regard. That, yeah, I think height, we've kind of like tried to poo-poo it for a while, that it doesn't matter, and drafted all these 6-foot guys, but I think it still does matter. And I think there's a reason why it's the tall guys who are still dominating the position.
Mike Renner might be a heightist at the quarterback position. And you know what? I think I'm with you. You make a good case, my friend. You do. It's an okay thing. You're the best. Thanks so much for spending so much time with us. Make sure you're listening to him. Push the Pile podcast. All things football on CBS. Thanks again, Mike. You're always making us smarter here when it comes to the draft. And let's check in again, maybe around the combine. We'll pull you again to the combine. I'm sure we'll both be bleary-eyed talking some football. We always have fun when we do that. So we'll try to do that again in a few months.
For sure, Phil. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff there from Renner, a heightist. And who can blame him? Especially given the results that the Patriots have been able to experience by drafting Drake May and watching him survey the field. That really has been a strength of his game that I think has surprised even the Patriots, who did, obviously, a ton of research on the guy before he was selected. And yet, as soon as he set foot in Foxborough, they were impressed by his ability to process. I can tell you, based on conversations that I had with multiple people at multiple levels of the organization, that was something that stood out to them and stood out to them relatively early. So while they had a lot to do when it came to footwork and mechanical work and getting the language of the play calls down and being able to communicate to his teammates, when he was back there and he understood the concepts and he understood the play calls and what his responsibilities were from play to play, he was able to get from his first read to his second to his third in really short order. And we've seen that on the field now as it's playing out. And I give Alex Van Pelt a lot of credit, not only for helping him along the way when it comes to learning that stuff and developing that trade, even if it was advanced from the time he really set foot in the building, but by building concepts that allow for him to go through those progressions nice and quickly, nice and seamlessly. Right? It is still something that's relatively new to him. So even if he's good at it, he's still not Tom Brady, right? Nobody is. Very few supercomputers in this league anymore. And so you need an offensive coordinator who can help build some concepts that allow you to make the most of whatever you have when it comes to that particular skill set upstairs. Okay. Great stuff with Mike. I did want to hit on 5 things really quickly. 5 things that the Patriots need to see this final month of the season to consider it a success. Because I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here necessarily, but there's a pretty good chance they don't win a football game the rest of the season here. At Arizona, tough. Chargers, tough. Bills, twice. Depending on how much they have to play for, tough. But what can the Patriots realistically expect to see or hope to see in order to consider this last month of success? And I hesitate to put it in those terms because it's not as though they need to see all of these people succeed. Not all of them. They would like to see some of them succeed. But they do at least need to see enough that they have a definitive scouting report of their own on these guys in a definitive, realistic projection of what these guys can be in 2025. Because if you don't, that to me is the failure. Find out what they can do. Realistically. Don't see a flash and put all your chips on the table for one of these guys next year at a given position in a starting role. That would be the mistake. What you want to see right now is a month's worth of work from these people and the ability to determine within reason, but still relatively securely, what they're going to be next season. Because if they can play great, that should alter how you build your team for next year. If they can't, too bad. But at least you know. And that's what they should be pursuing right now. Pursue the information. And here are the players you need to pursue the information on. Number one is obvious. It's Jalen Polk. Keep playing him. It's not looking good. I think there were two bad routes that he ran the other day, and they were both thrown at least in his direction. He was targeted once. It looked like he settled into a spot, and then as the ball was being thrown, it looked like he was settling into a different spot. The ball ends up falling incomplete. It looked like, again, without knowing exactly what the play call was or what they're teaching him, Jalen Polk settled into an area, and then he decided he was going to settle into a different area as the ball was coming his way. Incomplete. The other pass that was thrown in his direction but not targeted for him was on the corner route to Austin Hooper, the 7-for-7, as Ted Johnson described it on the breakdown this week. Beautiful catch, beautiful throw from Drake May. And if you get a chance, listen to the mic'd up segment that the Patriots posted on X recently, where Drake May makes that touchdown pass to Austin Hooper. And pay attention to the end. And I think you're going to see just a brief snippet. It's just a little window into why I think Drake May's teammates like him as much as they do, and why you should feel really good about how he develops and the kind of person he is, or the kind of teammate, at least, he appears to be, because he has his backup, Jacoby Brissett, in his ear on the sideline saying, oh my God, heaping praise, in my opinion, on Drake May. And he's trying to talk up his guy. And he's trying to just tell him how impressed he was by the throw. In my opinion. Drake May, what does he say in response? That was a heck of a catch, wasn't it? So he's taking what sounds like a compliment for him. Again, maybe Jacoby Brissett was talking about Austin Hooper's catch. He very well could have been. It was a great catch. But he's talking to Drake May. And it looks like when one of your buddies is trying to hype you up a little bit. And it looked like he was complimenting Drake May. And Drake May takes that compliment for him and he spins it around and he says, yeah, how about Austin? Pretty good, huh? That to me felt like a little bit of a window into what kind of teammate he is. Into the humility that he already possesses. And it's an earned humility in a way. Think about the confidence you have to have as a quarterback to be getting built up in that fashion by a guy who's seen a lot of great football in Jacoby Brissett. He was teammates with Tom Brady the year they won the Super Bowl. He's seen some damn good quarterback play in his life. He backed up Andrew Luck. He's been around. And the confidence you have to hear that and spin it around and not really linger in that moment. To not absorb it all for yourself and say, thanks, man. That was pretty cool. Yeah, that one felt good. He doesn't need that. It's as if he doesn't need it. And he takes it and he spins it around and turns it into a compliment for one of his teammates. That to me is impressive stuff. But they need to see more from Jalen Polk. Good or bad. And if it's not good, you move forward this offseason and you say, well, we know we can't depend on Jalen Polk as a starter for us in that receiver room. That's where you are already. But give him the next month to really flesh it out. One way or the other. Who knows? Say he comes on strong, shows you something. All right. A month's worth of games can do a lot for a player. And so if he shows to be a completely different guy over the course of the next month, all the power to him. Maybe he does factor into your plans. Player number 2, Layden Robinson, specifically at left guard. Gerard Mayo said he played his best game the other day. Some of the metrics, Pro Football Focus especially, didn't feel that way. But if the Patriots feel like he looks like a starter at left guard, that checks one of those boxes when it comes to what we talked about in last week's podcast when we talked about having 3 players for 2 spots. 3 for 2. Andrews, Layden Robinson, Cole Strange for center and left guard. Between those 3 guys, can you staff those 2 positions? If Layden Robinson looks like a left guard, if he really looks like he's playing his best games, final month plus of the season, that's a really good thing. Again, that's another position you don't necessarily have to prioritize come the offseason. It leads us right into our third player, Cole Strange, and I want to see him at center. I know Ben Brown has done some good things, and God bless him, and God bless the Patriots for having found him. I put it right there with, not right there with. Let's backtrack on that. Not right there with, but it's somewhere in Elliott Wolf's top 5 moves of the year, which maybe tells you what kind of year it's been. But listen, I give him credit for the Drake May pick. I do. Didn't trade down. A lot of people, including my buddy Tom Curran, who's got a massive brain, really smart guy, seen a lot of football, wanted them to do. Draft Drake May. Trade Matthew Judon for a 3rd pick. Matthew Judon doesn't look like Matthew Judon this year. They got a 3rd round pick for that guy. Excellent move. That's an excellent return. Grade A for that move for Elliott Wolf. Maybe somewhere after Judon and way ahead of Chuksa Okorafor is the signing of Ben Brown. That said, I still want to see Cole Strange at center because I don't think Ben Brown's the long-term answer inside. Ben Brown, by the way, looked really banged up at the end of that game the other day in the Patriots locker room. Looked like he was dealing with a lower body something. And so we'll see how much he's able to practice when the team gets back on the field next week ahead of the Cardinals game. But Cole Strange at center. Is he a real option there? Because, we don't know what David Andrews is going to look like. I'm not sure David Andrews knows what David Andrews is going to look like come 2025. But, again, if you feel like Cole Strange the last month of the season, does he play all 4 games? Does he play in 3? If he looks pretty damn good at center, does that maybe give you a reprieve in terms of feeling like you have to invest at that position, whether it's in the draft or in free agency, just in case David Andrews isn't himself next year? Player number 4 that you want to see a lot from final month of the season because it's another position of need as it stands right now. It's Alex Austin. Alex Austin, who made, by the way, Tommy Curran's stock up column following the game the other day. Up against the Colts. Let's go through the chart here. Up against the Colts. 26 snaps, 6 targets, 2 catches for 16 yards, 2 pass breakups, a quarterback rating allowed of 42.4, and yes, he did pick up a pass interference penalty at the end, which was critical. Bad time. Final drive of the game. 19-play game-winning drive for the Colts. However, at 6'1", almost 200 pounds, he fits the mold of what they need opposite Christian Gonzalez. They need a little bit of size. It's clear. Patriots like Marcus Jones. They're obviously still using Jonathan Jones a ton, and he's been playing some safety. I wonder if that's in his future next year, if and when the Patriots decide to bring him back. But they need somebody to play outside the numbers opposite Christian Gonzalez on a week-to-week basis. Just too many big receivers in this league, and there are going to be too many opportunities for guys going up against Marcus Jones to take advantage of the lack of size that the Patriots have at that position, unless somebody like Alex Austin emerges as a legitimate starting caliber kind of player. And if you remember, he popped at the end of last year too. And maybe there's nothing he can do in the last month that will make the Patriots feel confident in keeping him there and having him be the starter in 2025 and beyond, because he's just missed too much time. But if he keeps getting his hands on the football, and it looks like he's still in tight coverage on a regular basis against starting caliber receivers for some pretty good teams down the stretch here, again, maybe that just lessens your need. It doesn't wipe it away. I'm not saying Alex Austin is the second coming of Christian Gonzalez here. But do you feel like you could get by? If you're sitting there in the second round and you drafted, for instance, Travis Hunter in the first, boy, would they luck out if that was the case. But if you're sitting there in the second round and you're trying to figure out, do we go offensive line or do we go corner? If you like what you have in Alex Austin and you feel good about that, does it not make your decision a little bit easier? Maybe you go with the lineman no matter what, because the need is so great there. And you would hope in that theoretical scenario, hypothetical scenario, that they will have addressed the offensive line, in some way, shape, or form in free agency. But those are the kinds of decisions that are going to be made throughout the course of this offseason. And if you get a lot from Alex Austin the last month, all I'm saying is it can help you feel better about the picture at that position. Lastly, fifth thing to watch last month of the season. To me, it's the entire coaching staff, but specifically two guys that you want to see more from. Gerard Mayo, head coach, defensive coordinator, DeMarcus Covington. To me, Alex Van Pelt, of late, has acquitted himself probably better than anybody on that staff. Not only because of the way Drake May is playing, but because of some of these long drives that you've been able to string together. Think about the long-ass drives they've been able to put together and come away with points and at least put themselves in position to score points without nary an explosive threat. They didn't throw a pass down the field longer than 15 yards, I believe. Certainly nothing longer than 20 yards down the field. That part of the offense on Sunday against the Colts was non-existent. And they still should have put up, I think it's safe to say, 42 points in that game. You had 7 points wiped off the board with Hunter Henry, had that pass go off his hands and be intercepted. You lost 3 points off the board when Joey Sly missed a 25-yard field goal. That's 10 right there. To me, you lost 4 more when Kendrick Bourne ran a bad route, actually blocked Hunter Henry, basically defending his own guy. Supposed to be running a mesh concept with Kayshon Boutte going across the field. He stops in the middle of the field. When there's a middle-of-the-field target, just standing there waiting for the football right behind him. Mind-numbing stuff from a guy who wants to do better than that. Nobody's more positive. Nobody's happier. Nobody brings a better attitude to their job on a daily basis than Kendrick Bourne. And he acknowledged after the game that he's the one who screwed that up. But Drake May has to take a sack instead of maybe a touchdown. So that's a 4-point difference. So we're talking about 14 points in a game where the Patriots scored 24. Now I've got them up to 38. There's another 4 points if you're able to actually punch it in on first and goal from the 2, as opposed to committing back-to-back holding penalties, Mike Onwenu, Layden Robinson, to make it first and goal from the 22. And I'm sorry, I do think those were holds. Or at least, I don't think you can argue against those all that much when you have, in both scenarios, you have offensive linemen getting outside of the chest plate of defenders. And Mike Onwenu specifically sort of bear hugging on that wildcat play to Ramondre Stevenson, bear hugging a defensive back. It's a big guy on a small guy at the point of attack. Small guys trying to hold an edge to some degree. You just got to stun him in his chest. You could probably do it one-handed if you're Mike Onwenu. Instead, he gets outside, and it's obvious if you're a referee who's watching that play. So all that being said, 42 points for an Alex Van Pelt offense that has very little talent outside the quarterback position. He's doing okay. I like some of the creativity that he's shown. I liked that wildcat play if they could have blocked it up. I even liked the Jacoby Brissett, bring him in as a sneak specialist. He's done that in prior stops in his career in Indianapolis. That was the first example of him being in that kind of role that came to mind. And so I don't even know how much crossover there is on the staff between the team that's in Indy now and the coaching staff or the front office or whoever, even defensive players that were there when he was last there. But they had to know that that's how he's been used in the past. So he comes in, it's obvious. What are you going to do with him? You're going to use him as a, big old quarterback sneak specialist. Instead, they snap it, little end around, nice gain. He's shown some creativity these last few weeks, Alex Van Pelt has. So he's really not on my list. To me, he's safe. Mayo's safe too, but for other reasons. Covington, I think, will be back. I just think you want to see more consistency, more competency on a regular basis from both Mayo and Covington specifically when it comes to in-game stuff. How's the communication in the secondary? It's got to be better. That has to be point number one for DeMarcus Covington to address during the bye. And that has to be better during the last month of the season. Too many miscues there. Too many obvious communication screw-ups with guys who shouldn't be screwing up. Kyle Duggar's played a lot of football. He just got paid a lot of money. He's used in a variety of ways. He is an intelligent cat. How the communication seems to be getting as consistently bollocksed, bungled? Let's go with bungled. When he's on the scene is amazing to me. And so you have to get that solved. You have to get things like what happened in Miami where you're getting hammered for an entire quarter and you don't really adjust until halftime, and then it looks better. It's great. You got to it eventually. Good. Thumbs up. Can you make those adjustments more quickly? Those are the kinds of things I think are worth highlighting or at least looking out for during the final month of the season. And with Mayo, same thing when it comes to defensive execution. That should be your specialty. He should be working right alongside DeMarcus Covington this week when it comes to figuring some of those things out. But even some of the things like in-game decision-making, clock management, when to call timeouts, when not to, when to challenge, when not to. Let's assess the moves that he makes throughout the last 4 games of the season because those are areas where you want to see him improve. And he would acknowledge he needs to improve, and he's been learning. This has been a learning year for him. He's on the job a year earlier than the Crafts expected because things have gotten so sideways. And so how are you adapting? How are you evolving over the course of your first season as head coach? You've got this refresher now. You've got this bye week. Take a step back, and then you've got a nice, meaty month of the season at the end of the year against 3 good teams. 4 good weeks of competition for you to really show, I've learned a few things, and this is how I'm going to apply them. Don't wait until the end of the year. Do it now. That, to me, is something worth watching during this final month. So, bye week, good time to reassess. 5 places to really be watching closely during these last 4 games of the season. Jalen Polk, Layden Robinson at left guard, Cole Strange at center, Alex Austin on the outside, and Gerard Mayo and DeMarcus Covington. Defensive coaching for sure, but also a little bit more broadly, game management. All right, so there you have it. There's your bye week podcast. Plenty of looking ahead, not only to this season, but also the draft. You know we're going to be hammering the draft for a long, long time here on Next Pats. So keep it with us for all things Patriots, all things young Patriots, specifically all things Drake May, all things draft, all things free agency, right here on the next Pats podcast. We'll talk to you next week.